Hits it up top. And we are live.
Welcome to episode number 4 of the Meditative Monkeys podcast.
Cuatro.
We'll do some actual... let's do some
hands lagging a
introductions.
bit.
Let's do some introductions this week. What are you doing?
Yes. I was just putting 4. Episode 4. But my hand's lagging a bit. Okay, go on.
So we'll do some introductions this week because it just occurred to me that for the last 3 weeks, we just kind of jumped right into it, and as if we're assuming that everyone knows exactly who we are, or at least our name. Well, I don't know. Maybe it brings up our names in the video. Who knows?
Who knows? Well,
anyway,
let's do it. Who are you?
I'm Ben.
Benjamin. Hi, Benjamin. Nice to meet you. I'm Steven.
Hi, Steven.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, I was a little lagging with that one too.
That's okay.
I'm Steven, and that's Ben, and we are Meditative Monkey.
We're the Meditative Monkeys.
That's it.
Hey, why don't we talk about what that means for a moment? Because I don't think we've actually discussed it.
Why don't we talk about what it means and how it originated?
Dude, I don't even know how it originated. Have you got that story?
It definitely originated from you, right? Like, I think it was like you were starting with like you were looking to make like a class and whatever, or something along those lines, and like that was the logo that you wanted to go with.
Yeah, I don't know what it occurred to me. I've always liked the idea of that the contrast of sort of the monkey brain, the playfulness, the instinctive with the intellectual, the analytical, the comparative mind, and maybe that going into sort of deeper philosophical thought processes. And I like that sort of contrast of being able to go from being very serious and thoughtful to kind of silly and playful and primal in a way. And I think there's something in that, in the two, there's a yin and a yang quality there.
And I think in all fairness, that's kind of like what like monkeys and gorillas and primates, like that they can do better than us, or I wouldn't say better, different. We have a lot of like lag time periods thinking. It's like them, it's like they can go from play to serious and like change their personalities like for what it needs to be, not change, but like just really like hone in on what they need to feel at the time, because they're animals, right? They're all like instinctual. Versus us, we're always like second guessing, hesitating, this and that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we have this great tool of this sort of intellectual center, this intellectual brain that is obviously so beneficial because it's allowed us to create culture and technology and everything,
advancements,
everything that we're doing right now, having a conversation,
which is pretty cool, by the way.
It's awesome. But then that same tool can also get in the way of tapping into and developing the rest of you, because we're not just the intellectual mind. We're also you're also this kind of monkey, this playful being, and we have feelings and a body and instincts.
Well, and then just even on that note too, like I was thinking about this recently, and I think I was talking to someone and they were mentioning how they felt separated from their subconscious and their physical. And it was funny because it seemed like the further that you get separated from your subconscious and your physical, the less important the physical seems to be to that person. And we all know this, and I'm sure even a lot of the people that are separated know this, but you get into a point where you're telling yourself that physical just doesn't matter. You know what I mean? And then it's weird because then there's more neglect that happens, and then you start to create this whole separation. And that's where I think, I don't want to like say identity crisis, all these things come from that, but like if you don't keep yourself healthy, if you're not in tune with just even your physical, how your body needs to function and work, you're literally not letting your brain function properly.
Yeah, you're fragmented.
Because you're literally cutting off seconds of your brain and cutting off highways of your brain and not giving them healthy avenues to like work. Right. So your brain is definitely not even working at a whole capacity. That's kind of like even like my argument with like really, really intellectual people too, that like really put physical health aside. Is like, you guys are so focused on building your brain and building smarts, but your brain literally has a whole nervous system, has this whole thing that it deals with, that it works with, a whole muscular system, like a whole chain of connectivity. And if you're cutting that off, it's like, how can you really get to your full mental capacity if you cut that off? Obviously, like Stephen Hawking, people with detrimental injuries or born with bodies that aren't full functioning, different story, because I think your brain recognizes that to a certain extent and it will make up for it in other areas. But when it's just coming from lack of care, lack of love, lack of just even like you have the function, it's just lack of use, then I just think you're really causing lag and like sluggishness in your brain.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a difference between adaptation due to necessity versus adaptation out of neglect. Because someone who's born with a physical disability, their whole nervous system is going to adapt out of necessity. It's like if I'm going to survive, this is what needs to be done. Versus if someone doesn't address their physical health and doesn't practice a physical lifestyle when they do have the capacity to, if they've got a perfectly fine body, but they just choose not to, then I wonder if somehow the adaptation is different. And it's the fundamental difference is out of necessity versus sort of out of neglect or choice.
And I wonder, and I don't know if I'm going to put this in the right context, but I wonder if like, obviously by not giving love to your body or not creating those proper pathways of like health for the connectivity of your body and like being neglect on that is going to have effects of feeling sluggish. But I wonder in a weird way if it actually hinders your ability to hit a peak in other aspects. Like I know obviously you're going to be more tired and stuff like that, and I get that's going to be a factor, but even to a point of like those pathways can't work fully. Like I just don't see it happening. You're not letting your brain kind of filter everything the way it should.
Well, I mean, think of it on the basic physical level that you're a system of systems, and often these systems are sort of scaffolded on top of one another. So one of the systems might be the cardiovascular and the cardiorespiratory system, and this is a system that's essential function is to provide nourishment and to remove waste from the tissues of the body.
Yeah,
and all the tissues of the body, including the brain. Yeah. And including the prefrontal cortex, the intellectual brain. So if you're not taking care of, we know that through movement and exercise, you can, maintain and improve the health of that system. And that system is going to have implications on your ability to think, because that ability to think is scaffolded on top of that basic metabolic function. And so if you're not taking care of those basic metabolic needs and maintaining the health of the hardware, then it's like if you had a computer that was filled with viruses and the hardware and it was dusty and it didn't have, and the fan was all fucked up, so it wasn't getting any kind of cooling, and then expecting to be able to run
video, like the big Call of Duty or something.
Like a
high-end video Adobe game. Photoshop. Let's give something that's
exactly
more contextual around everyone.
You can't really pursue higher needs and higher expression until you've taken care of the basics. And it's an irony, because there's people that maybe are more intellectually inclined but neglect their bodies. It's ironic and don't see maybe not don't see the value in it, but they don't value it as much.
I would actually personally, by sitting down and working for 3+ years as a consultant and talking to new people every single day, I had a lot of, and again, I'm saying smart by position, right? Like a lot of what would be perceived as intellectual, smart people that had to take time in school, becoming lawyers, doctors, like positions that are considered higher intellect, again, more studying, more schooling, more scholastics, all that stuff.
Yeah.
That don't see value in it. Like it's not just like it's not even like they
I'll challenge you on that, because you're doing a consultation with someone in a gym, so some part of them has compelled them to walk into a gym. Yes. So if they had no value assigned to their bodies, you wouldn't meet them to begin with. I would say.
You're right. Fair enough. So I would say then we would go with like skewed values about it.
Yeah, or just very minimal.
Very minimal.
But particularly in comparison to us, and it's ironic because of the people who would benefit the most from a physical practice, it would be those individuals, and yet they're not doing it at all. And then you've got people like you and I who are probably training like in some cases way more than necessary, or for what is just healthy and for general well-being. Yeah. It's because it's a real passion or an obsession. So the people that value exercise the most probably need to do it the least, and vice versa. The people that value it the least need to do it the most.
Do you, I find it's almost like a human error problem in a sense of like, and I got this when I was talking to that person about the same thing, about him being, feeling separate from his physical, and super smart dude. I think it comes down to a weird human error that we have of feeling embarrassed to try new things or be bad at stuff.
Yeah.
And I think we just streamline ourselves to what we're good at. And I don't want to say like me and you are great at this stuff, but knowing you and like knowing me in the past and like the stuff that we've done, like we see we're open-minded and we put forth an honest effort. And like that's what I ask from a lot of people when I work with them or when I'm doing anything with anyone, right? Like I took Sophia to go golfing today and we went to the driving range. And all I asked from her is like an honest effort, right? Like don't feel embarrassed, don't feel like you're not good enough. Like put an honest effort, put yourself in a learning environment.
Yeah.
And I think these people are scared to put forth an honest effort because they're scared of failure. Like even talking to this person, I asked him like, like avenues that you're good at, like, why do you do that? And he goes, because I was good at it when I started it.
Yeah.
And then
I remember, I don't know how long ago, maybe a year or two ago, Ido Portal put up a little, maybe 1 minute video where he posed the question of, are you choosing your practice or is your practice choosing you?
Yeah.
And what I got out of that was this idea that often because of whatever inclination, maybe your structure, maybe whatever was taught to you when you were young, maybe you, for whatever reason, you may be in a position where you find yourself doing a practice and you're telling yourself that you chose that practice, but maybe it was more the other way around, where that practice existed and it was a force that just kind of like a magnet drew you into it. I kind of think a simple example, tall people playing basketball, as an example of that. And so it speaks to what you're saying, that, we avoid the things that we maybe aren't naturally inclined towards because it doesn't feel as good as doing the things that we are good at.
I actually take a little bit of maybe like a similar view to that, or a similar idea from that saying, but I think I put it different in my head in a sense of, when I hear that, I think of, do you choose your practice or do you let your practice choose you? In a sense of, I think a lot of people, especially in the gym life and the movement life, you get comfortable with certain things, so you continually choose to do those.
Yeah, we like habits, we like routine.
Yeah. And being good, right? And being good at stuff, right? Like showing off, being good, whether it's to yourself or whether it's to other people in the gym around you. And or are you letting your practices choose you by saying, I'm good at this, I'm not good at this, so this is what I have to do now, and that's how the practice is choosing me. You know what I mean? And I think that's very tough for people. And even like my transition to understanding my body more and understanding exercise and putting more emphasis on my body and less emphasis on the actual exercise itself, all started with kind of letting my guard down and working with you guys and really like, letting my mind become one with my body versus trying to stay in just the context of like an exercise. You know what I mean? And like that was where like I was letting the practice choose me. I had an injury, I had alignment issues, and I knew that this way was going to help. I didn't know, but, working with you guys really made that clear pretty quickly, that this way was going to be a lot more beneficial for me, not just in the short term, not just fixing the injury, but like, from an intellectual standpoint, from a longevity standpoint, from a health standpoint. And I just kind of let that practice choose me and then build on that type of thing,
Well, and we say a lot this idea of this type of practice or working with you guys or this way, and it can sound very vague. But I was just thinking, I wonder if all we're talking about is just following a path where you are, I think, paying attention to your own body. You're being clear on your intentions. You're pursuing growth and learning as a real priority.
Yeah, and
from that, you naturally stumble across certain values, like working on things that you like, being okay with working on things that you struggle at,
and
trying
being
to,
okay, yeah, looking bad at doing it and stuff like that.
yeah,
You know,
being okay with looking bad doing it, valuing effort rather than outcome.
yeah. And it's funny how scary that is for people though too, right? And I'll say, even including myself, I hesitated in the beginning, and even talking to this person, we're talking about getting together again and doing some training and stuff like that. And one of the biggest things was, is not the physical movement. You know, like the person's down to go to the gym and do physical movement. It was more the mental attention that I was bringing up to him that he was battling. You know, I said, you've gone to the gym, you've worked out, you've worked with coaches before, and you're committed. You show up every time, all these things, but he's mindless when he goes. He thinks when the coach says do this and I do this, it's just going to work. And I'm like, dude, it's like playing a video game. I can put you, and he's big into video games. I can put you on a video game and you can just click the mouse and run around. But what are you doing? You're there, but what are you doing? Yeah. Right. And it was a weird thing, because I even asked him, and I'm like, give me 10% of the hour of just your full mind and being able to be silly and being able to like fail and let yourself not do stuff great. And even that was like a push. Like that was like he was battling still. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a weird like, and I understand it. And it's something that I even personally try and like fight, even like going to teach like the classes and stuff, right? Like I didn't have the biggest background experience in teaching classes, but to be honest, when I went and did it, it's almost like, what do you have to lose, right? Put in an honest effort.
Exactly.
And I did, and whether I failed or not, it was what it was, and like that. But I'm not knocking it. I do understand. It's like it's tough to do, right? And like anything in life, like working out, like doing repetitions, it takes time. You're not going to be able to go jump into the deep end of, you being a socialite, or like, being able to run and teach a class right away. But if you don't try, if you don't push yourself, just like every other aspect, it's like you're gonna get stuck,
And that's another key to, this way, this method, or maybe the movement perspective, whatever you want to call it. I think there's a high value placed in complexity, in working on tasks that are building towards complexity. And I think one of the reasons for that is because when you put yourself in progressively challenging environments, in a progressively challenging situation, and that could be an internal environment. It doesn't have to be an external environment. Often it is an internal environment. You're trying to orient your physical self, in a certain way that's progressively more and more challenging and complex. That it gets to a point where attention is not only beneficial, but it's necessary.
It is necessary.
That's why I love the handstand practice, for example, or even the spinal wave practice, because besides the obvious physical benefit that's gained from these, they're great practices because the only way to do them correctly is to pay attention. You can't
throughout, like literally throughout. And like that's my personal experience working with Ben and like trying to do spinal waves, and it's something that I shy away from myself too. And I almost, I don't want to say beat myself up about it, because it's not something I think about like often, but it's something I do here and there, like slowly want to add back into my practices, for the reason of being like not scared of it, but like being shy of it. You know what I mean? I really want to put myself through that process of going and not shying away from something, and a lot with the physical benefit too. But yeah, there's so much. It's tough, right?
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's something we can relate to, because it's not like, I think there's always a risk, or there's always this feeling when talking about these things that we're coming from a position of authority, and that creates a separation. As if a perception that we're somehow different from the average person, and like we're people, like we're average people,
like,
and I think
much the same. I think more than people like could imagine.
Yeah, and so I just think of us as people with a bit more practice in a certain domain.
Maybe hours, right?
Yeah, and maybe with some tools and some shortcuts. But a good coach is someone who can really relate, because they have gone through it themselves and they've experienced, like fear and embarrassment, and or the fear of embarrassment and shame and getting it wrong and being ugly and all these things. Yeah.
Well, I think where you're at right now is doing two things for our podcast. It's a good segue into our first topic today. Yeah. And this gives us the prime example of how Meditative Monkey started. Me and Ben would go outside, we would chill pre-workout, we would chill, have coffee, and we would just start topics, and we would be all of a sudden looking at our phone being like, oh my God, I have a client in 5 minutes. It's been an hour and 10 minutes. We got to go.
Yeah.
And we're here now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel it's a real, for me, it's a very important part of the practice because it helps bring energy and inspiration into the practice. Mm-hmm. Like having these kind of conversations and, but also the practice informs the conversations. It's that spiraling relationship.
Like we talked about in the last podcast, it's always that spiral, right? And it's like, and it's cool too, right? Because like, again, like people probably see us as more experienced and think that we know everything, but like I have just as many questions as the next person. And I have just as many questions about even the things that I've done that I think are right to the next person. It's always nice to sit down and talk and that's why we always talk about feedback. If you guys have, whoever's watching, you know, send feedback, send your questions, send your input, because for us, it's always continual learning too. And as I said, that's why I like to talk to you about my ideas and what I feel, because it just kind of gives me some sort of reference, you know, or some sort of understanding how you're feeling, how I'm feeling. And then slowly, at least as a coach or someone that is trying to help people, like for us, it gives you a little bit more of a broader idea of how you can bring that to people. You know what I mean? A little bit more of a deeper understanding for other people, because just like breaking it down, problem solving, you know?
Well, that's a really interesting point. I just thought that sometimes I'll look at coaches who are really successful or that whose clients love them, and it's sometimes it's hard to tell why, because a coach might have a certain personality trait. Like they might be so energetic and just positive and like everything's like a party, and everyone loves them. And it might be, you might think, shit, if I'm going to be successful, I guess I need to be like that. But I don't. But that's maybe that if that's not your inclination, if that's not a comfortable state, then that's a really.
So it says like a false connotation as to what you need to be successful in a weird way.
Yeah. So I think having conversations like this and just presenting our perspective, at least, is sort of adding to the collective knowledge and maybe helping give a little bit of perspective to show, you can. This is our way that we find. We can be successful in our work and in our practice and feel like we're doing good. And there are certain qualities that contribute to that are very individual. Like I think there are certain things about you that make you who you are and make you a great coach that can't be replicated. There's no point in me trying to copy that. But there are also qualities that you would embody that have been learned and that I could also learn.
Of course.
And take inspiration from that. So
yeah. And I think it's important that we talk about these things too, as you said, and put forth almost like, I don't want to say it like the formula or something, but like, you know, us kind of separating the meat and potatoes, the important stuff that's universal versus the stuff that's going to be personal. Right. So like we're going to go into now talking about, you know, making sure that you walk the walk, you know, walk the talk, like making sure that you're doing stuff. And we'll get into like what that means and everything, but you know, like personality being super exciting or being super like serious, being super like military, those are like things that you can choose to suit you. But then there's other things that are like have to be that meat and potatoes, that like the fundamentals where that's going to be universal, right? And I think one of the main things for us that we're going to get into today is walking the walk, walking the
talk. Yeah.
Walking the talk, right? And you can give us a little jump into that.
Sure. So the first topic that we're going to talk about this week is one that you brought up, which is the idea of the importance or the value in continuing one's own practice as a coach or as a teacher, while also continuing to teach. And I think it's interesting, and the key word is continuing, because maybe it highlights something that you and I often see, which is someone who gets into the fitness world as a trainer or as a group instructor. They do it because they love fitness and they love movement and they love exercise and they want to inspire others and to help others in the same way that they may have been helped. but then when they get into the work, their own practice starts to fall apart, becomes inconsistent, is diminished, or even loses focus. And there's an irony in telling people, you know, you should be consistent, you should work hard, you should work towards goals, etc. But then you're not actually doing it yourself. So,
and it's a lot more common, I think, than people think going into the fitness world. Like for new trainers, like they really drop off. And just to kind of tie in what we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago, I think, about like overworking yourself, taking on like a really big client load when you're not ready to, like, you know, program for them and everything. It becomes a little daunting when you're working so many hours a day and you have all these things building up. And usually for a new coach too, right? A lot of times you're almost newer in your practice for the most part. You know, I think it's a little bit more rare for someone to become a coach, I think, the way that me and you did, where you're kind of practicing for a while before you decide to go that route. A lot of the coaches that I've seen really get into fitness for the most part, when they're starting, are a lot fresher to the industry. You know, a lot of them have usually worked with like a coach before, and, you know, that coach suggests that they're, you know, great at working out or something along those lines. You know, you're doing great. You know, you should think about a career. I've seen that happen a lot in Good Life, by the way. Good Life used to have a model like that, and I wonder if it started happening more after they acquired CanFit, because it's like free business, right? Like everyone that went into Good Life, you could have been knighted by Arnold Schwarzenegger by being the best bodybuilder in the world, and these guys would be like, yeah, but you still need CanFit, bro. Like they made I remember they had I was like personally friends with the lady that like wrote part of the test and or like the test. And when Good Life bought the company, they made her rewrite it. And she's like, here, just take the money if that's what you guys want.
Rewrite it in what way?
Like she had to write, she not like rewrite the test. She had to write the test.
She herself had to.
She had to get CanFit.
Which means she would have had to pay for the certification.
It was like absolutely mind blowing, because I think when they bought it, she wasn't affiliated with CanFit anymore, but she was still affiliated with Good Life, like, or something weird like that. It was just a whole conundrum of, you know, corporation doing corporation stuff. But yeah, back to the topic. I just think a lot of people, they start and you're fresh into fitness and you love it, but then you take on this daunting task of too many clients, delivering stuff to them, and that really starts to take a toll on your training life, right?
It's like you're getting caught up in this honeymoon period and not thinking long term. You're not thinking of it as a marriage. You're thinking of it as a fling.
Of course, right? And for two reasons, you know, like, and I've said this before, perception is reality, and we've seen this in the fitness world over and over again. How many times have you seen someone so fit that puts in zero effort to their learning and just their growth and their ability to just continually get better and get better at teaching you, but they're packed just because they look good, and the assumption that clients are going to get results just based on the look. And then you can have a guy, you know, that has lost and gone so out of shape, but that has all the knowledge in the world. And, you know, and listen, there's special cases for everything, but for the most part, that guy that looks good is going to have the better clients. You know, it's like
more clients.
Me telling you, more clients. Like me telling you to invest money, and you look at my bank account, I'm minus $10,000.
Yeah.
And then Warren Buffett is like, here, invest money. And you're like, oh shit, this guy is billionaires, billionaire club, something like that.
Well, there is something to it. I think of the great saying that you should never trust a skinny chef.
Yeah. Well, this day and age, I think we can be a little more lenient with that.
Yeah,
but back in the day, 100%, never trust a skinny chef.
But we understand the spirit of that idea, right? Which is that
of course,
you want someone's appearance is going to be reflective of or we assume that someone's appearance is reflective of their lifestyle and of their values. And I actually think that's probably true, but it doesn't. In the case of being a teacher, being jacked doesn't necessarily mean that you know how to teach.
Of course.
And so it's a little tricky, because I understand it. You know, I look at someone again like Ito, and what grabs you at first as a young guy especially is the aesthetic. It's like, this guy is fucking jacked, but flipping around and doing handstands and all these strength moves.
Well, and that was like a really big catalyst to even me like going through that with you guys, and like actually like taking the plunge and like and asking the questions was, you know, looking at you, looking at Julian, looking at Ito, looking at like Roy, and being like, bro, I was told mobility is gonna make you skinny. You know, I was told being like mobile is gonna make you weaker.
Yeah, being flexible means you're gonna be weak.
And then it just blew me away, and it gave me a more understanding of what mobility means, and what and it was just crazy. And I think just on that point, one of the important things, if you want to be a good teacher, I think you have to understand that you always have to be a student. You know, just because you're a teacher to someone doesn't mean that you can stop being a student. I think that's how we can continually grow.
Well, that's how we always hear this emphasis on empathy and how important empathy is in all kinds of relationships. And I think that's true, but I don't think empathy is easily found just by trying to will it into existence. Like, I can't just sit here and try to like wish that I could really put myself in your shoes.
Yeah.
Unless I have some personal reference to draw upon. So if I'm going to be a teacher, I could attempt to empathize with my students, but I can't really do that unless I can draw upon my immediate personal experience of being a student myself.
Yeah. And I think, and just in that point, right? Like if you stop that when you become a coach and you just kind of streamline yourself into the stuff that you already know, then you have this like hollow arrogance too sometimes, and you put that towards clients, right? Because I'm so good at doing this because I bench all the time. Why aren't you good at it?
You forget what it's like to be a beginner.
Yeah, you almost do, and you expect people to really just like progress and like become good right away, right? Especially if you've been luckier, especially if you've been luckier genetically, or like you have less hindrance in your structure and you've been more physically active your younger life, and that's what brought you into being a teacher, right? It's like easy to get carried away with it, and when you kind of streamline yourself, as we talked about earlier, into like stuff that you're only good at, and you don't continually be a teacher or a student and like learn stuff that's difficult for you, then it becomes just even so hard to transfer that over to someone in a proper way, like you're saying, with empathy and like understanding of like how hard it is to learn something new, you know?
Exactly. A really good example. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was just gonna don't finish up there, and then I'll actually want to hop onto like a little sub point of walk the talk, because I think you'll like this one too.
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to share a classic example is people who have been brought up in competitive gymnastics aren't often great gymnastic teachers for adults, because the child body, the adolescent body, the developing body learns and adapts quite differently from an adult body who's limited largely by mobility, for example. And
I do have a rebuttal to that. I think it would be dependent on your skill level when you start and your capabilities when you start. Because if you're younger and you're not great at it and you have to put forth an effort to like grind and learn and be good, then I think you can. Coming from a soccer background, right? There's some kids just that are like naturally talents, bro. Like they're just from day one, they're great. And then you have kids that become great, and they're still young, but they've had to like grind a little bit more and pay attention a bit more. I think there is like a nice process there, even if you become good, if you're like learning. But if like the people that have the natural talents, it's hard, right? Because it's like I'm good. Like why do I have to work?
Yeah, that's a good point, and I think that's often true. That the people who have had to struggle to learn are better teachers for that reason, because they've struggled to learn it.
And it's funny based on that empathy point too, because you see it even with a lot of athletes, right? The ones that are arrogant, cocky, seem to have had those childhoods where they've been great the whole childhood. You know, the great athletes that are a little bit more humble and a little bit like greater, like I would even say, like in a weird way, I know Michael Jordan's like a little, like there's wishy-washy on Michael Jordan, but for the most part, that guy's like a very humble guy. He's humble. He's confident in what he's done. He's has so many accolades, so that he has the ability and he has the reputation to, like, you know, say I did this, but like humble in the sense, like, bro, like as I said, like that guy he got cut from his high school team. You know what I mean? Like that was someone that didn't just rely on skill. That was someone that relied on continual learning, continual effort, pound the pavement, like push your body, ask your body questions so you can become great.
The opening scene of Space Jam
is the best. Dude. So what is it? It's like it's a biography-ish.
The start of it, yeah, a little bit.
Yeah,
A little bit.
Yeah, you know.
Part of it. But I think in the case of the gymnast, even the kid who has struggled to learn,
Mm-hmm.
I would wonder if they were to go on to teach as an adult to adults,
yeah,
that what they have struggled with is learning the skill component. But with gymnastics, there's a huge mobility component too. You need to have the range of motion accessible in an active way. And for children, it's often the case that they already have full range of motion, passive full range of motion available.
They're like mutants. You know, they're
Yeah,
like you're looking for the specific qualities.
Yeah, and they just haven't. Children also just haven't been. They haven't adapted to life enough yet to to be restricted, to be tight, to be locked up. Yeah, so they're already open. So for them, it's just a lot of it's just developing body awareness, control, and then learning
as you grow
the skills. But as for gymnastics as an adult, there is a skill component, but you can't even begin to access many skills or even begin to ingrain those patterns until you're able to get your own body into the shape or something resembling that shape. And that requires, following mobility, like developing mobility.
Being a baby, being a baby and doing it from then.
Yeah, and that's a different process than just learning the skill. So but I think the basic point is what you hit on, which is that the great or the better teacher is often the one who has themselves prioritized being a student, and then as a student has had to struggle to learn they found it difficult. It hasn't just come naturally to them.
And I've even found, like, sports wise, again, like that's what I can attest to the most. A lot of the best coaches I've had and a lot of the best coaches you see in professional sports are players that played the game before but didn't necessarily make it to the highest level or were superstars.
Yeah.
You know, it's like they knew the effort that had to be there and they put forth such an effort that they made it, but they knew what they were missing. And these players don't even know what they have with all the skill. You get what I'm saying? Like, or they don't know how to they don't know how to put it into context to people.
You see that a lot in martial arts and boxing.
Yep.
A lot of the great coaches have had careers, but they were never the best.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's because
it's almost like you know what you're lacking and you know how to help, and you know how to help that person that has the skill hone in on it, because you're almost like longing for it. You know, you're like,
that's what I'm saying. They're still hungry.
Like, dude, your leg works. Just fucking kick the guy this way.
You know what I mean? I'm saying. They're hungry. They had a dream.
It's crazy.
They had a dream and they didn't quite make it, but they still have an opportunity to help someone else get there. Yeah. Whereas, I don't know if GSP is going to be a great coach.
Probably not,
because like he's done everything he needs to. He can retire and sail off into the sunset, or right off into the sunset, sail off into the horizon.
He also just his personality though. He seems like he could be, because he's so bought in. Like, he's like a next level. Like, he's like
it's possible.
He's so bought into like the lifestyle. Like, he's not just fighting to again, what I see from like a outside standpoint, like, he looks like he's just so bought in.
But wouldn't it be kind of odd? Like, it doesn't seem common for like a Michael Jordan to become a great basketball coach. For a Tiger Woods to become a great golf coach.
I will say with
for
Jordan,
Jimmy
though, leaving to play baseball was kind of a hint. Like, he loves basketball, but like that's also to a point where like he was like out of his life. I don't even know how much basketball he plays now. I will say, I guarantee you, GSP will be wrestling and jiu-jitsu for his whole life till the day he dies. Whether he's teaching, whether he's just training himself, I think it's like a little bit more of a different. It's more of like, I know basketball is like a lifestyle thing, baseball, soccer, hockey, but there's just something about like people like GSP, like Ronaldinho. Like, Ronaldinho still plays soccer, bro. That guy was in jail and he was playing in jail. He was organizing games in jail.
Huh.
Like, imagine, like, that's like I feel like the passion that GSP had. Like, whether he's on a camera, whether he's not, he's like doing it for like internal self.
Yeah,
and those are some good players. I think that do make good coaches. Because they have the empathy. It's like they have the skill, but they have the work ethic. They have the understanding. It's like kind of that yin and yang of both, right?
Yeah.
to hop onto my sub point of what we're going to say about walking the talk. If you guys are coaches, and this happens a lot with new coaches, because if you're not putting forth an effort to continually learn and put forth an effort to like not just learn an exercise but understand it, I find a lot of coaches early in their career are looking for ways to expand their training and give people new training, and they try stuff with clients that they've never done themselves. And I've seen this with coaches in the gym multiple times.
Yeah, once or twice.
If you're gonna do something with someone, this is the epitome of walk the talk, guys. If you're gonna be telling someone to do anything in the gym, please make sure that you've put in I don't know what the hours number is, like, because that could be different for everybody. How long it takes you to learn, how long it takes me to learn, how long it takes Joe Schmo to learn over there, I couldn't tell you. But please make sure you put ample hours into understanding what you're delivering to someone.
Yeah.
There's even from a personal standpoint, right? Like if that client is asking you questions and you can't respond to them, A, that doesn't look good for your business and your brand. But B, it's just like, how can they have confidence in you as a coach to help them succeed when you're like, I don't know, or you're putting them through something that you've never done before?
You don't know what it feels like. It's very, how could you possibly,
right?
how could you possibly do
my
something
hip hurts when I'm doing this. Why? And then you're just standing there like making up either something on the spot or saying you don't know.
Yeah.
Right. And it's crazy. I've seen it countless times, right? And or guys, please don't invent something on the spot either. No, I've seen it, bro. I've seen it. Like there's one thing, innovation, but just like anything in life, if you're innovating off proper building blocks, and again, you've worked on the innovation, like the guy you sent me today doing the axe wheel circle thing, like bogus, but done in the right context, done with the right understanding, could be beneficial.
Yeah. Or fun.
You know what or fun, both, right? Like depends. Like beneficial might be lower, but fun
is a benefit too.
Sure, right? But in the right context where you're safe, and even for him, like sure it was new for him, but he has the building blocks to get there.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of what I've seen from a lot of like newer trainers and even some old trainers that have streamlined themselves is they want to jump to teach people something new, but they haven't taken the time to understand that, whether they took some time and not fully understood it or took no time at all.
Yeah.
It just seems there's such a lack of just information and just knowledge and just feedback and all that stuff.
I really want to expand on that idea a little bit.
Yeah, let's go.
That really comes to mind. So tell me what you think about this idea. So we know that there are, like that idea, there are levels to this shit, right?
Of course. Yeah.
So I think that's actually a useful way to think of it. There are levels. There's a hierarchy in a sense, and you work your way up. You can think of this in terms of exercises. A one-armed handstand exists higher on the hierarchy, and
lifting your hands up,
and it is of higher level than lifting your hands up, or doing like a yoga frog stand, for example. A two-handed balance with the knees supported on the elbows. Like there are levels to things. So I believe that I don't know the specifics, but I think as a general idea, I believe that as a teacher, you can only bring people up to your level.
Agreed.
I don't think you, as an individual teacher, you can bring someone
to your knowledge level. Because as we talked about, like as an athlete, like again, some people might be specimens. Like you might get people that are like physically capable of doing so much, and they just don't know how to mentally contextualize it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you get those freak guys that come in, they'll jump like a box jump this high, and they've never worked out a day in their life. And you'll put like 2 plates on the bar, and they'll squat it out, no problem.
But I think if you've got someone who's genetically gifted in one capacity, I don't think a coach could help them really develop that capacity much more. They can help them round out their tool set.
Sure.
With the things that coach, it might be knowledge, it might be technique, it might be some other aspect. But someone like Tyson, I don't think he was taught that power. Mike Tyson.
Oh no, of course not.
I think he was given
how to use the power.
He was given. I think
raw.
his coach had skills and was able to connect the dots of applying. Well, if you take this technique, and you apply and you give it to someone who's got this power, that's probably going to be a winning combination.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was saying too. Like it's not necessarily like the coach doesn't have that power, but he has the knowledge to understand what to do with that power, and then he's that bridging gap of that person's power. He's like putting the brain into that, correlating the dots so that he can use that power.
But you can only bring him up to that point. So I think,
of course,
I think as a teacher, if we're just talking about the physical domain, I think you can only bring someone up to the same level that you yourself have been able to attain. And part of it's for the reason you described earlier, which is that you've gone through the struggle and the steps to actually get there, because it's more than just understanding intellectually those steps. There's that physical process of actually doing it and going through it. And there's an understanding and embodiment, an embodied knowledge and embodied wisdom that comes from that you can't just learn from a book. You have to do it. So I think if you want to, if you have aspirations, the reason this is important is that if you have aspirations to help people, to help them be better versions of themselves, to be a higher version of themselves, then you can only, and I actually think it might only be possible to bring someone up to a level just below where you are.
Below
maybe, it may actually be difficult to even bring someone up to your level. But I also think maybe there's a sort of an elastic property that the further you are, that the quicker you can accelerate someone up.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
As long as there's still that connection there. So, if you've got someone who is, for example, someone that wanted to develop a lot of strength, they want to get really, really strong, and that was their priority. If that person worked with a coach, just, someone who did a little bit of bodybuilding, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and they're pretty strong compared to the average person, but they weren't strong on, in terms of powerlifters. I think that coach, we could say is here, the individual's there. That coach might be able to bring them, slowly up to this point. But if you had a great powerlifting coach who themselves had competed and taught for many years and had lots of experience, their level's up here. They start working with that client. They're going to accelerate through those initial phases, and then it's going to get a little bit slower, as you get to where that coach is at. So I think being of a higher level as a coach and as a practitioner yourself, as a coach, you not only expand and increase the number of levels that you can work your clients through, and the height, and you increase the peak, the height of that peak that you can bring someone to. It also means that you can bring a beginner up there quicker. Because I've actually noticed that myself, is that earlier in my career, like say 8 years ago when I started strictly personal training, I was still teaching a lot of the same stuff that I'm teaching now in terms of what exercise, in terms of the goals of getting people strong and mobile. But I know now for a fact that I can get an absolute beginner to that point much quicker than I could 8 years ago.
And that's 100% guarantee.
Yeah, that's like consistent across the board. And I attribute that to to developing more experience with working with people and leveling up as a teacher, but also deepening my own personal practice and finding more efficient paths to get there is one of the ways that, or one of the tools. So what do you think about that idea, basically, that was kind of levels?
I was going to touch on that, right? So I think depending on the level of coach too, right? So if we're talking like elite level coaches, of course, elite level athletes are going to get to here. I think what elite level coaches understand and what makes them elite level coaches is they understand this. They understand that a client or an athlete or whoever you're working with is going to get to this point here. If a client gets this point here for an elite level coach, I think what they do, and I think what they do really well to help that client or that athlete or that person just continually succeed, is you get them to understand what they need to do, and then after they get to this point, you almost let them freely explore what you taught them while keeping them in certain checkpoints. You know what I mean?
You're almost like certain standards or something.
Maintaining certain standards, but allow them to now not just understand what you're talking about, but explore it. Ask themselves like continual questions, or see what they can build off what you've taught them while you are keeping them in check, right?
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Because there is like, don't get me wrong, right? Like once you learn and become professional, like all these baseball players, basketball players, LeBron James, Phil Heath, bodybuilder, Mr. Olympia, 8 times, they have coaches. Do these guys need coaches? No, but yes, right? Like they wouldn't have them if they didn't need them. Could they fare without them and progress? Sure. But it's like that weird, like keeping in check, like on that coach knowing like when to like chime in, when to let the person be free. You know, I think that's so important when you get to those levels too, right?
That actually speaks to a really interesting kind of meta layer of coaching that I found, which is that a good process when teaching seems to be starting with a lot of restriction and limitation, and slowly taking those restrictions and limitations away from the client or from the student until they can play and improvise and sort of take it for themselves. But if you start too open, it's overwhelming and confusing. But you start with lots of restrictions. I think of I listened to a podcast with Joe Rogan, and he talked about how his archery teacher has a particularly good and unique method of teaching archery, where he has a mechanism that takes away control of the release. The teacher controls the release with a button. So all the student needs to do is focus on lining up the shot, and then they actually don't know when the teacher's going to release it. So
he'll release it when it's quote unquote perfect. So the brain just correlates that.
So all they have to think about is the technique of drawing the bow and lining up the shot, and just maintaining the
and I'm sure he'll give like one or two, like elbow up, extend more, tighter, and then before you know it, bam, gone. And you're like, and then your brain just clicks. It's like quick. It's like almost like because even if you're letting go, you're still thinking.
That's another layer. It's another layer of complexity.
When it's like flight or flight. You know, it's like, oh shit, and your brain just like
it's just reflex, just reaction.
And
you don't
like, wax on, wax off, Mr. Miyagi, and then he goes to punch you. You're like,
exactly. So he starts with taking tools away from the client or the student, and then slowly gives them back to him. So starts with the restrictions and then slowly opens it up. So I think that speaks to what you're saying, and that's a really, really interesting idea.
I had a weird like thought process with like soccer about that, because I always thought about like teaching kids soccer and like bringing like the movement, mobility, body awareness to like young kids in the soccer field, because one of the biggest issues that I found too growing up and looking back now in hindsight is all the stuff we did in practice wasn't wrong. Squats, not deadlift, squats, lunges, you know, like all these like little body movements that are going to help you like get stronger hips. But my issue was, and what the issue for a lot of the players is, you have all these bad habits from injuries, all these misalignment problems from, you know, continually shooting one foot all the time. And like those were being amplified going through these range of motions in a negative way. And I believe that was a big hindrance to and a big cause to my hamstring popping. Right? Because it was like I was doing these movements and I started going to the gym, started doing them heavier, and I was functional because I was going through the range of motions, but I was twisting my body more and more into those bad habits. Or what I would say at the time was more of just specific tensions, right? My goal was kicking soccer balls all day, 6 days a week for the most part when I was, you know, mid-teens to earlier ages. And that's just what my body became doing. Kicking the soccer ball, rotating, right? So like bringing that awareness and always trying to bring someone's body back to neutral, I think is so important for like young kids like that. And a drill that I was thinking about though, with like what we're talking about freedom in like context, was working in like having kids run the play of like, for example, making a pass, receiving a pass at point A and making a pass at point B, but like giving them freedom in the middle. So making sure like, okay, when you receive that pass, I want you to receive that pass as fundamentally as possible. Then you have the freedom to do whatever you want in the middle. And then when you make that pass to the next player, I want you to make that pass as clean and fundamental as possible. And my idea behind that would be, it allows the children to work with the freedom that you still want to like give people, right? There's freedom in like movement, there's freedom in like play, but you still want them to understand context in that freedom and understand principles in that freedom.
And to isolate certain variables.
Exactly. So I'm going to do a couple moves, but you know what? I'm not going to do a million step overs because I know I need to make that perfect pass when I come out of this. You know what I mean? And I'm going to do moves here, but I'm not going to rush and make my move and screw up my touch when I get the ball, because I'm going to make sure I make that perfect touch on that receiving the ball. You know what I mean? And like, and then have fun in the middle. And I think that gives like like an environment where you can still be creative and still get to point A from point A to point B. because they found an issue like this, actually. Sorry, just to cut you off. They found an issue like this. I think it was an academy in England, and they were taking players from like South Africa and Brazil and like all these things, and they were trying to put them in too much structure. And all these players that had so much potential were like not gaining any sort of potential. And they found like Brazil, like Neymar's and these guys in South Africa, it's like there's so much freedom in play there. Like it's like almost like no structure, just freedom, have fun. And if you can find a way to like mix that in, I think that's so powerful, right?
Well, it speaks to our topic last week of structured and intuitive or open training, and how we kind of agreed at the end that it's about, you could start with one or the other, but then ultimately you want to have that interplay.
Intermingle.
Yeah. And I think, we talk about that idea of starting fairly restricted and expanding from there as a good process for learning. I think we see this with children. We know that to teach a child, you don't just give them access to the world. They start with just literally all you're aware of as a baby is just kind of what's immediate, and then your awareness itself starts to expand outwards.
That's actually a great concept too, by the way.
Yeah,
it's true, eh? Like you literally know, like you're immediate, and then you start to learn how to be aware of bigger waves, and
then you can start to eventually think about the cosmos and the universe and everything, and the way that they would learn physically is you start with a small playpen and a couple of toys, and then the playpen gets bigger and the toys become more complex, and the child develops more complex, more tools within themselves of having different options with their own body. So think of video games. You don't just jump in with a video game with all the tools available. Often they start with restrictions.
Well, even before that, as a baby, you can't even move your neck.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can't even look at your limbs really. Like you're just kind of like lying there, and then your eyes, and then your neck. Oh, that's kind of weird. And then it's like you like see your hands, you scratch your face, and you see your feet, and then you crawl, then you walk. Interesting.
That's what I'm saying, man. It's just it mirrors. It's the learning process. We can see the learning process unfolding, and that same process is universal, regardless of the stage of development. We just recognize it because that's a very common experience that we can all relate to. Yeah, being a child.
And I think that's why the physical health is so important, because it's kind of always, if you're doing it right, and whatever that means, and I think what we're kind of getting at, there's no right or wrong, but what we are perceiving is right is the continual learning in any regard.
Yeah.
If you want to go become, a marathon runner and learn how to be the best marathon runner, that's going to benefit you. You know what I mean? But that continual learning becomes so important, because I think it even is such a cross reference in life, right? It keeps you on the path of learning and understanding what the steps of learning are. So when you're starting something, it becomes that much easier to become better and good at it.
You're learning how to learn.
Exactly, right? And like even to prove here, I would even say, and please remind us if we're wrong, but like from episode 1 to episode 4, just paying attention has been able to, even personally for me, I think allow us to speak a little bit more like calm, freely, a little bit more concise. You know what I mean? It's just, and I think that's something that we talk about and we do well, is like, how do we continue learning, right?
Yeah, exactly. And to bring it back to tie up the topic, it's about walking the talk. And I think it's to even take it a layer deeper to relate to previous week's concepts. It's about living out that hero's journey within your own life, because when you're taking a client through a workout, I think you're playing a role of that. You're their Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're their Gandalf. You're their Dumbledore. You're there to be that wise figure who has lived, who has walked that path before, and can give the hero some guidance along their own journey, on their own hero's journey.
And just a side note with the learning too, right? I think that, and don't forget, that also means learning about the person you're working with. I think that's an important thing that people forget too, and they get too caught up in what they're teaching people. Learn about the person you're working with. Learn about their capabilities. Learn about their hindrances. Learn about their, just even their personal life. It's all relevant. Like I had a lady today in the class, and I talked to her last time she came. She was there early, and she told me she had ankle problem, this and that. And the other coach was walking around today, and she was kind of mentioning her to go lower on her squats. And I was like, how's the knee feeling? Is it because the ankle? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, just, make sure, you do this, and this, so we can keep the weight off. And you know what I mean? Little things like that. From a business perspective, people think you're a wizard, even though you're not. You're just paying attention. And the cool part about that is people, and especially a lot of people you're going to be working with in the beginning, they paid such little attention that they actually think you're a genius. Like, I'm sure you've worked with clients before, and especially just like even like touching them and helping them manipulate their body and understand. They're like, dude, you're a wizard.
Yeah. Like, oh my
You know
God,
what I mean?
My arm has never felt like this before.
You know, and it's weird because it's like, and just like I say, and I'm sure you say it too, is like, you're not.
Yeah.
You almost feel like a normal person.
Well, it feels
and
like
they're so far removed, right?
No, it does feel like being a magician in the sense of, I understand that this seems like a trick. This seems like magic.
Yeah, but guys,
there
is just the cards here.
Yeah, there's actually a very often boring explanation.
Logical, boring, like easy explanation. Yeah.
Or it's just so unnecessarily complex that it's not even worth going into. You know, just focus on the result. Yeah, I've really drawn. I mean, like, dude, I grew up loving magic and trying to learn tricks and stuff and picking up deep VHS tapes and whatever. And yeah, I think there's so much. Being a trainer is a lot like being a magician. You know, you're playing a role and you're kind of trying to get them into a state, almost with you're trying to inspire someone into a certain state and to.
Except for us, we're telling them the process.
Yeah, when then trying to explain.
We're like the trick, and then we're actually explaining the process.
But
it's funny because if you do it with magic, people are like, "Oh," and you do it with fitness, and they're like, "No, I still believe it's magic, bro." Yeah. They're like, "Dude, just do it. Trust me. Go through the process."
So, talking about the woman with the ankles, I think that could go nicely into our next topic. So, topic number 2 was. This week every week we would like to add some sort of improvement or develop it. And you mentioned that maybe we're getting a little bit better at having the conversation itself, but I thought this week we would try to intercut some tutorial videos that we've recorded separately, and maybe we'll talk about them a little bit as a bit of an introduction now, and then we'll cut to the videos in a moment with a bit of the explanation and a demonstration. So we can call this exercise of the week or tutorial of the week. Maybe we'll come up with a name in the future.
We'll figure something. And if you guys, again, I can't reiterate this enough. If you guys think of anything, throw it out there. Trust me, listen. My brother sent me a lot of stuff that we look over. We're here to listen and learn, guys, just like you.
Yeah. So if you have any ideas for future stuff, we're happy to do it. So you mentioned that you worked with a lady who had issues with her ankles. And I don't know the exact situation, but it just draws to mind a very common problem that you hear about, particularly when meeting someone, like doing a consultation or meeting a client for the first time, and you're discussing goals or any limitations they may have that they want to work on. And a very common one that I find starts even as early as when someone's in their 30s, even sometimes younger, is expressing that they find they have very bad or poor balance. Often that's related to things like, I feel like I have very weak or unstable knees, very weak or unstable hips, my feet hurt.
My knees give out.
My knees give out, yeah.
My ankle locks up.
And I think this is particularly important as we age, because as far as I know, one of, if not the greatest risk factors when it comes to things that can negatively affect someone's quality of life is, for seniors especially, is falls. And the fall, not just the fall, but the consequences of the fall, which is often that they fall and they've got, and there's some sort of fracture. And so they
life alert. I've fallen and I can't get up.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And they fracture a hip, fracture the spine, fracture the pelvis, and then mobility is gone and the quality of life really diminishes. So it's interesting because often when someone comes into a gym or they're talking about balance or how their balance is really poor, I'll ask them, well, how often do you practice it? And the answer is, it's like,
what?
Why? It's almost met with confusion, or it's like, well,
what do you mean?
Balance.
Yeah.
And so I'd say, well, look, if you came in here and said, if you walked into a gymnastics gym and said that you were terrible at one-armed handstands, then it would be pretty obvious, like it'd be pretty self-evident it's because you don't do it, it's going to require a process. So why would balance be any different? Or would any capacity be different? And for me, it comes down to the belief that everything is learned. There's nothing that's inherent or built in that you just have, naturally. I think everything has to be learned through effort, and can only be maintained that way.
And both ways too, though, right? Don't forget, right? Like that means even like negative paths that are created in your body are also learned. It's not like you sit down one day and your back gets tight. It's you're putting in reps and reps, and if that's how you think, if you start thinking about it like this, it starts to become a little bit more prevalent and understanding. You're putting in reps and reps by sitting in one spot all day. Like you're in consistent tension no matter what you think, right? And I think that's where the weird divide comes about, like someone going into the gym and like being like, hey, I suck at one hand handstands. You're like, you obviously don't practice it. Versus people that come into the gym and you ask them about balance, they're like, what do you mean? They view as their body as like somehow is this vehicle that's just naturally going to get them through life, without work. And I breed you to look at your car, right? If you don't change the oil, if you don't put gas in your car, if you don't, you know, rotate your wheels, take summer tires off and put winter tires on, like all these things, then your car's not going to last. And it's weird because people like come in and they just think that their body somehow is going to have balance, strength, mobility.
And then when it starts to diminish, that's just an inevitable process. It's like, okay, I had balance and now my balance is going. So that's just the path of things.
We've talked about this so much. We've had conversations with people that are younger than us. I've had conversations with people that are like 24, 25, and they're like, dude, my back, I feel it. Wait till you get my age. I'm like, I'm 30 years old.
Yeah.
And I actually feel like I'm improving.
I have a very confronting approach to that, but I find personally what helps the most is to take on a perspective. Is say your back hurts, rather than thinking, oh, my back is hurt or my back has given out, which is sort of, it's creating a separation between me and my back.
Yep.
You take responsibility and you act as if you are responsible for everything that happens to you. So my back is hurt. I have done something to my back. What have I done? What have I done that has led to this back pain? Yeah.
Ask questions, right? And I think that's one of like the biggest starting points that I try and talk to clients about is just ask questions.
Yeah.
You know, like I even told the people in the last class, and I was like, all the stuff we do today, guys, I go, you know, just a little like pro tip, a little hint. When you're at home and you're sitting in your chair and you get up, do it like the squat you did today. You know, when you're bending up to pick up your laundry, do it with the amount of attention and effort that you put in today. And it might not be 100% for them. They might have only put in 10% or 30%. But my idea here is just like sitting in the chair and your body responds to the negativity. If you're continually just jabbing your brain with little snippets of being proper or just mindful, then that percentage is going to jump. And then when you come back to the workout, you come back to the environment of where you need to use that. There's less of a lag time of figuring out how to use it.
Yeah.
Because you're continually telling yourself how to use it, right?
You're keeping those pathways active. And
that's why people come in and they stick like this, because they're here.
Because that's the habit that you're practicing and reinforcing. Yeah. Because how you do anything is how you do everything.
It's weird, eh?
Yeah. So, you know, well, so that's kind of the background that I think balance is not a capacity that you just have. It's something that's earned and can be developed throughout the entire lifespan. I know this. I work with people, you know, well into their 80s who have been able to dramatically improve balance just with some simple exercises or simple progressions. So I put together a bit of a video that's going through some single leg balance exercises.
Nice.
From all the way as an absolute beginner, if you just cannot stand on one foot, all the way to balancing on one foot with your eyes shut and your hands in your pockets.
Those were always fun, by the way.
Yeah, so
I never got that far, but those are always fun, by the way.
Well, you have to listen to the podcast or watch the podcast and take some notes from the video. So
of course,
we will cut to that right now.
Hi, coaches. I wanted to share with you a few exercises that I find to be particularly useful at helping people develop their balance. In my experience, it's very common for people to express or to find that their balance is lacking or that they're very bad at balancing. And, you know, a simple question might be, how often do you practice? And the answer is often never. So incorporating some exercises that can help challenge one's capacity to balance, deepen one's understanding of what it means to balance, I think is a really useful tool for any training program in some capacity. And I thought this would be these would be a few good progressions that could help an absolute beginner all the way to something that is maybe getting a little bit more intermediate. So they're all versions on a single leg stand. So to start with, I'd like looking at the ground. So you have a fixed point of visual reference, and you can also catch your own body in your periphery. Arms out, lift the inactive, the passive leg up onto the ball of the foot, come up onto the toe, and then lift up. And then you can use this passive foot just to gently tap when necessary to maintain the balance. So you've got the arms to make adjustments, you're trying to feel the reactivity in the foot and the ankle, and then using the tip of the toe, as opposed to using a wall, say, just using your own body. So you can do this anywhere. The second step would be holding. The third would be taking the eye line from the floor to now looking straight ahead. So I have a little less peripheral awareness of my own body, and I don't have the same fixed point of contact on the floor that I'm balancing on as a reference. Then we'd work on bringing the arms down, or you can even bring them in your pockets. So you're taking away the tool of that quick adjustment to redistribute weight. The last step, you could then shut the eyes. So now we're depending on proprioception and the reactivity of the ankle. Of course, you could have an intermediary step, which I think I missed, where you bring the arms out first, and then you bring the hands in the pockets for working on that one leg stand. So just a series of progressions. In terms of dose, I really find you get a lot of bang for your buck out of 2 to 3 sets, working for about a minute per side, and then starting on the weaker side tends to work better for multiple reasons, but it's just a good reference. So starting on the weak side, at the end of the day, that doesn't matter too much, though. You're working on both sides regardless. So 60 seconds one side, 60 seconds the other side for 2 to 3 sets. And I like to do it at the end of the session. In most cases, maybe at the end of a lower body session, but you could also incorporate something like this as a warm-up as well. So let me know what you think. Let me know if there are any exercises that you find to be particularly useful at developing balance. And yeah, hope you find this valuable. Thanks.
And we're back.
Welcome. Shit, that was long.
Wow. Yeah.
How'd you guys feel? Great. Did you learn?
I loved it.
Dude, I thought it was amazing.
I mean, I filmed it and I still loved it. I thought I learned so much.
Your glutes, I don't want to say it. Your glutes are on fire. I know it's funny
because you can't see them in the videos. You can just tell. It's that side butt.
Of course, dude. It's like side boob.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Butt. Dude, it's wonderful.
Man, have you seen that guy's side butt? Damn.
Imagine that were to become a trend.
Dude, I told you
there's under cheek when like the girls wear their shorts like super short and you get that like little ass cheek. You gotta figure out a way to get like side butt.
While we're on the topic, I told you I figured out my porn name.
Oh yes, I was actually gonna ask you about this, guys. This is live. I didn't hear this yet.
So we were putting together. My wife and I were putting together a shopping list for this afternoon, and she was asking me what we need, and we were rattling it off, and I said, we need meat in bulk meat. And then I reflected and thought, bulk meat would make a great porn name.
Just fucking dropping the hammer.
Bulk meat. But imagine if someone's name was like first name bulk, last name meat. Like that's what their mama named him.
Dude, I'm sure someone in the world exists with that name. Like I'm sure of it.
Like I'm sure. Like there's Bulk and Skull in Power Rangers, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. There's a guy named Bulk.
Actually?
Yeah, Bulk and Skull. They were like the comedy duo.
Huh.
Yeah, the comic relief. So,
I don't remember Power Rangers too much. Like I remember it and like like all the context and everything. But like as for like names, characters, like
dude,
blank.
I've got all of it up here. It's
I know they all become one like Megazord, yeah.
Dude, they do reproductions of the toys that I've been picking up. Like for people
Have
like
you
me
actually?
who, yeah, for people like they're like remade the old toys, but like better quality. And for people like me who grew up watching and now have disposable income,
Yeah.
I've actually been really surprised to learn how many coaches, especially like trainers around our age, were inspired by the same stuff, like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Dragon Ball Z.
That was a big one.
Yeah, like those are the two massive ones, and then you've got like Bloodsport for some was like a big one, like all those like 80s and 90s like martial arts films.
When he throws the sand in his eyes.
And the music that goes into slow-mo, doesn't it?
Dude, I think, is it Bloodsport or Kickboxer where they go into the village and they move the fight into the village?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, I think it's Kickboxer. Dude, they start in the facility and the fight literally makes its way into like the village. It's so good. And JCVD, man. You know that guy only worked out with machines?
He only worked out with machines?
Only machines, as far as I know. Like something like mental like that. Like he specifically, like, even like to this day, I'm pretty sure all he talks about works out with machines. Like not his martial art training stuff like
that.
That's
what I was gonna say.
Like his physical like bodybuilding training, like looking like a action movie star that he was, all machines.
But I would argue that's the way to do it, right? The machines are the icing on the cake. So I bet he does I bet he's done. I mean, he definitely does mobility work because he's got that fucking split. So
of course.
And all the martial arts is like explosive, powerful strength. So I bet he has that foundation, and then he's using the machines to get the hypertrophy, the aesthetic. Yeah, and that's the way you meant to do it, right? Like, like we talked about, like Arnie would do his feet together, ass to grass, back squats, and then would use the knee extension, the leg extension machine as a finisher. It's not the meat and potatoes of his training.
Wait, you're telling me you don't start your workouts with leg extension,
seated calf raises,
and then you do the rack? Just put it to the bottom. You lift your bum up, and your legs are just doing this. You don't start your workout like that?
Man, I was at the gym yesterday and there was a couple. I mean, maybe it works.
How busy are the gyms right now? Like,
it's not crazy.
They have a limit?
Yeah, they got a limit. But the limit's like
so?
The limit at my gym is like 100, and the gym can't even fit 100. It's ridiculous.
We have 40 here at Good Life, which is dude, it's pretty empty. Like, it's wonderful. But go on.
It's nice.
So a couple.
Yeah, there's this couple, and they were doing. I mean, look, maybe it works for them, but they were doing at least 45 minutes of pretty much all biceps. It was like supersetting.
Yo, not even triceps.
No, it was supersetting. The guy would like superset. He'd do like bent over rows.
Okay.
And then he would get under the bar and do like a body weight bicep.
And then were they doing like back with accessory finishers of biceps, or was it like mostly bicep? Like
no. Okay, so it was like a pulling back bicep.
Yeah, back
so it's like
bicep.
They're doing a back and bicep day, right? But the problem with this methodology is that you can't isolate. It's not like when you're doing, because you called it a back exercise, suddenly the biceps aren't involved. It's
Wait,
like
what?
So he's doing like a row, a bent over row, and then doing like a bicep curl on the bar, like a body weight curl, and then doing single arm rows on the bench.
Yeah.
And then supersetting that for multiple rounds, and then doing multiple variations of curls. And the problem with it, I think what made it particularly egregious is range of motion was at about 60 to 70%. It wasn't going all the way up or all the way down.
Well, I'm sure he was so fatigued that his range of motion came from body moving as opposed to actually like range of motion.
And that was the second thing, is all the movements were coming from his legs, pulling from the legs and the back just to get the weight up.
Oh, I've seen those dumbbell rows on the rack where it's just full on, just torso rotation.
They yank it up and then it just drops down.
It's just locked and then it just drops. It fucking dislocate your shoulder.
Yeah, so I mean,
interesting.
I mean, they didn't seem to be hurting themselves. It's just like there are clearly more efficient and smarter ways to train, I think.
But I think that's what it comes to like, not just, and just to even build on what we said before, there's one thing of learning, and then there's one thing of asking questions. And I was going to talk about this earlier. I think you mentioned about like reading and then not understanding what you're like putting out there. And I think a big problem in the world for that, and that is held in a higher regard than even trainers, which is weird to me, is physiotherapists. You know, and I'm not knocking physiotherapy, because the ability to make you better is wonderful. The ability to have that knowledge. My cousin's going to school right now doing placement, you know, like kinesiology, going to school for physiotherapy, working in a clinic as placement right now, everything. I would work with him, no questions asked, because I know that he's reading stuff that I've never even read before, but he works out and feels his body daily.
Yeah.
You know, one of my biggest issues that I've had with physiotherapists and working beside a physiotherapy clinic is maybe 10 to 20%, I even would say 10% of the staff that were treating people worked out, but like not even regularly.
Yeah. But worked out once in a while.
And it was mind blowing to me, because you would think, right, like to have someone do an oil change in your car, you could just go to anyone. To have someone specialize and fix like the pistons that are broken in your car, you're not just going to go to anyone. You're probably going to go to the dealership special mechanic that deals with that.
And you would hope that maybe the mechanic drives cars once in a while.
You would need to.
You would expect.
And didn't just read a book. You know what I mean? And like that's like the weird thing about. Yeah. Well, I guess you're right. It would be like a mechanic that's working on cars all the time that doesn't actually drive cars. Like there's just so much about driving a car and like listening to it and like hearing sounds of what's not working, right? And like being able to diagnose it. Just like the same with like working through your body. It's like, yeah, that was a perfect analogy, but it took me a second to really understand.
Because it took you a second because it's so
ridiculous.
It's so dumb. It's so obvious. You're like, of course the mechanic drives the fucking car. He's a mechanic.
But Ben, are you dumb? Yeah. And then I was like, wait, I'm dumb.
Like, Ben, you're a master at stating the obvious. Thank you very much. Yeah.
And then I was like, holy shit, you just inceptioned me. But yeah, it's really like that. And I found it like mind-boggling and bamboozling to me, because not only were they not providing them with a service where they were getting return from, or the perceived return, but just because of their position, and just because like it's paid through insurance and this and that, even they knew they weren't getting better, but still thought they were getting the perceived return.
Yeah.
And then you'll have the opposite of like someone working with us, of people that have put hours in our body, and the physio will say something that they've never put hours in their body, and then they'll like try and argue with us. And I'm like, you've been getting the return from us.
Tricky.
You've been getting no return there, and you're seeing return here, but you're arguing with me, and you're not seeing return here, and you're not arguing with them. And I'm just like, it was like I've had people cancel training before.
Yeah.
Not with me, but cancel training with the clients that have told them to, that trainers that would actually help them benefit more than what they're doing with the physiotherapists and then physiotherapists they're working with. And they cancel training to continue the physiotherapy. Mm-hmm. And I was like, come on, man. I go, and I'm not discounting the fact of diagnosis. I'm not discounting the fact of soft treatment, of ultrasound therapy, acupuncture with electro, like chiropractic alignment. But what I'm doubting is those, again, like we talked about earlier, are the icing on the cake. You know,
I question chiropractic adjustment. I want to throw that in.
I also do question chiropractic adjustment.
But the rest of it, I'm more or less.
I was just like talking the realm, right? But like you know what I mean. Like chiropractic adjustment. Well, I think one of the biggest issues with chiropractic adjustment, and even the mindset of people just going to physio and health and wellness themselves, is the same thing about expecting your body to just work.
Yeah.
They expect that they go get cracked, and all of a sudden their spine is going to stay aligned.
Well, that's actually exactly why I don't think it works, because I think postural adjustments and cracks and stuff can be perfectly healthy and beneficial as long as you're producing them yourself, because you're linking them in with a motor pattern. It's being linked in with a habit.
And funny you say that, because the closer that I come to understanding my joints and my capabilities in my body and connectivities in the chains, the more I find my body is like snap, crackling, and popping into place.
Yeah, because it's ready for it now. It's prepared.
And I'm getting bigger alignment cracks in my spine now just from holding my body in tension and moving into proper areas than I ever did getting cracked by chiropractic.
Exactly.
Ever. And release and like and real connectivity where I feel like I'm stronger. Right. And I think, and it was like, and it's weird because I think like like there's just such like a remove of like these, like, again, as I said, the soft treatment stuff is great, but if you're not getting taught, or someone can't teach you how to utilize that, or what your limitations are, you know, outside of a context of a book, because they've gone, it's just, I find like it's almost like it's a shitty process, because you're thinking you're getting this perceived value, you're telling yourself you're getting this perceived value, you're almost tricking yourself and saying, you know what, it's going slow, but it's working, even though you know it's not.
There might be some benefit for some people, because if they tell themselves that they're investing in their health by going to the physio or the chiro or whatever, then they might actually start taking better care of themselves in the rest in their ordinary life. They might start becoming more aware of.
There's some sort of like jump off effect and placebo effect to that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But like, again, like just even being in that moment, like you're thinking you're getting this knowledge, and these people don't even put any hours to be able to transfer the paper into their physical, to transfer it to your mind, to your physical.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of just like paper in here and here. What does that really mean? Are you asking why?
Yeah. Dude, think of just, we could think of so many examples. Think of any trade, especially where someone, just like the mechanic that doesn't drive, you know, it'd be like a builder who's coming into your house to try and diagnose a problem in the home, who's never built before, who doesn't build houses, you know, who just doesn't build. It'd be like an engineer who doesn't design. It would be like a chef who doesn't cook, you know. It'd be like a musician who doesn't play. It would be like just pick any field. It's anything. It's so obvious that it's ridiculous. But the point is that I find this with massage therapists as well. You know, it's not. I think massage therapy can be wonderful, but the best massage therapists are ones who have a movement practice, because they understand. They don't just understand, or they don't just know intellectually. They understand in an embodied way what it means to have tension, to feel relaxed, to have pressure applied. Like they know what it feels like to be in an active body.
And I know you understand this because you've worked on me, and you're not a massage therapist, and you've been better than any massage therapist that I've probably been to, besides like Edward is good. I'm not gonna say like you're better than Edward. Edward was good. Like I really enjoyed working with Edward. But I'll even say the same with me, like, you know, just even like grabbing Sophia's arm and like working out kinks and stuff. It's not that I'm a great massage therapist. Not that I went to school for massage therapy. But I ask my body these questions, like what are issues, what could arise, like what are the daily stuff that people do that could cause issues, and how are they manipulating people's body? And people think I'm some sort of genius, and I even joke that I'm doing it from a selfish standpoint.
Yeah,
I'm data farming.
Yeah,
I'm like, I'm just figuring out stuff. Like I'm having more fun than you are.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And it's like an odd thing, and they think like I'm some sort of, like, as I said, or like you, especially when you worked on me earlier, I was like, holy shit, this guy's like fucking. I'm like, oh, and it's only because like you've gone there, you know, and you might not have you might not have the exact same issue, but if you've gone there, if you've explored, like you have a reference point, you know, you can help people understand.
I know what it's like to have tight shoulders, and I have tried many, many things, and I can, you know, make some educated guesses on what's probably going to help up front. Like I remember with Joe, you know, he had our friend and ex-colleague, you know, we would had issues with his elbows and would have pain with elbow extension.
Yeah, you know why? Because he's trash at League of Legends and all these.
Shots fired. Shots fired.
I hope he watches this.
And I just did, you know, a couple of minutes of soft tissue work on his tricep, and he's like, dude, I have no pain, and this has been a problem for years. It's like, you're a magician. It's like, no, it's just, you know, now you know this, you can take care of it yourself that.
And it's like almost like they didn't bother to ask questions.
Yeah.
You know, and like that's just that's kind of what it is at the end of the day. It's just like question, why isn't this working? Why doesn't this work great?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or why does this work really good and this side doesn't? You know, and I think that's what's helped me grow the most, is like knowledge is knowledge, but like, you know, as Darby courses say, knowledge applied, right? Like it's like it's true in the regard of like knowing something's great, but until you start putting it to the pavement, then you really start to know like the details. You know, knowing something's like, you get the big picture, it's like cool, but like what are the minor things that are going to hold you up?
It's like thinking that you understand the terrain just by reading the map.
Yeah, of course. And like, and especially like, and the worst part is sometimes is like, again, sometimes you get a map from someone and they have some of the details and you just think that's all of it. And you're like, well, this is the map. They've done it. This is the map. Meanwhile, that person only, saw that terrain from a distance.
Well, we've seen how the map of the world has changed over time as we developed, got a deeper understanding and better technology
flat. It's flat.
Well, it started flat, then just the shapes that we thought that they were and the relationship between them was just different.
I'm joking. We don't think the world's flat. I'm kind of speaking for Ben right now, but Ben.
I don't know, man. Looks pretty flat to me.
Hey, wave. I'll be able to see you since it's flat from Australia.
We just need to find the right angle. Yeah. Hold on.
Oh, wait.
I need to get a little higher.
There's the shadow. That's funny.
Facts.
So flats.
Look, I got to go pick up some bulk meat.
Yes.
So we had a third topic, but we'll save that for next week.
Let's do a little preview. Why don't we start with the preview?
Yeah. So we're going to talk about our ideas and techniques around training while in quarantine.
Okay.
And not just kind of a fitness tutorial of at home workouts or what to eat and whatnot, but also thinking about the attitude and some of the ideas behind it, because it's been really
and little things will make a difference. I think I have some good ideas to put out there.
Yeah, and I think it's about emphasizing that I think now more than ever is a really great time to work on yourself and to develop a movement practice, because
and I think it's a perfect time to go into it, because now we're getting out of the sexy part of COVID. You know what I mean? Like that first beginning where everyone's like, nice vacation, getting paid by the government. I'm going to do my fitness because I have time, but that's dropped off. You know what I mean? Like, this is the time where we can really start, honing in on some things.
Cultivating that hero's journey.
That's it. That's all.
Yeah.
We're all heroes. And I think if we all think like that, I think the world will be a better place. I actually, especially since we talked about that hero's journey last time, I personally think a lot of people stop their hero journeys, and that's where a lot of hate comes from.
Yeah.
Because when you stop building yourself, you're stopping your progress.
Yeah.
And then people that are progressing, you're not going to understand what they're progressing. You're not going to understand certain things, and that's where like hate comes from. You know what I mean? I think, and like just misunderstanding and like the empathy part. The more that you can just go on that hero's journey in any regard, the more you're telling yourself that not that you're not good enough, and not that you can be better, but you can like there's more. There's more. And the more that you understand, the more like, again, let's say we have an issue, the more that I can and we can break it down and think about it and ask questions as to why you're feeling a certain way versus just having one answer. You know what I mean? And I think that's what the hero journey is really important for.
I just want to sit on that for a moment. I think that's a really, really cool point you just made, that hate and anger just comes from misunderstanding. And it might manifest as jealousy or envy or fear or whatever, but the root of it is not understanding. And I think that's a really beautiful model. I think you might have actually hit on something really profound there, that if
I honestly, I won't even take full credit to that, because just thinking about it now, like, because everything that comes out of our mouths, right, is for the most part, even if you're making it up, is some sort of correlation of pre-learned stuff.
Yeah, it's a remix.
Right? It's a remix. And like where I kind of got that from was, I forget the black gentleman's name, but the guy that was converting all those KKK members.
Oh yeah, Daryl something, I think.
Yeah, Daryl something. And the one thing he said was, it was just honest to God, at the end of the day, a lot of it was a lack of just understanding.
Yeah.
Like there's like, and you create, and the thing is too, and I do see this in fitness a lot, with people being separate from their body, and they become more and more scared to ask questions, so their body becomes the enemy. You know what I mean? And the same thing, I guess, happens in life too. It's like you get so far removed from something, or you're told something, and you stop asking questions, and you just take it for what it is, and you never progress your learning. You never ask why. You know what I mean? Why do I hate these people? Why am I mad right now? Even like little things like that. Like, I've started to ask myself, even when I like get into situations where I get mad, like, why am I mad? Right. And a lot of the times when you ask yourself why, it's almost like you put a lot more into context, and you can really make more informed, empathetic decisions, like, even like understanding like your own context and be like, listen, I'm mad at this guy for doing this, but you know what, maybe he's doing this because, you know what, the last time that I was in his similar situation and I did that, it was because I was feeling a certain way.
Yeah.
And that made me react. So like, if I can put an understanding towards that, maybe I'm not going to be as negative. You know what I mean? I find that like that's a big issue in the world now.
But it's really beautiful, because it sounds like what you're saying is that fear and hate comes from ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
And so the path to trust and love and comfort and, goodness comes from learning.
It's true.
Education and growth. And that's in essence what that hero's journey is about, wanting.
And just on that note, like that doesn't necessarily mean like doing math problems, school, college, right? Like this is like, I think this starts with just learning how to pay attention, and then learning how to process what you're paying attention to, and then learning how to like subsection that into like feelings, emotions, and learning how that like plays with you. And then you have just such an understanding of that process versus just reacting, and you don't even know what you're reacting to in a weird way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. Really, that might be even really weird, of like asking yourself about like maybe like childhood traumas and stuff. Like, do I react a certain way because of a child? And those are hard questions, right? I'm not like telling people go sit here and like ask right away, or like maybe like seek help if you need to talk to people, or talk to friends or whatever. But once you start putting yourself, I think, in that mentality of continually learning, it really opens up it knocks down a little bit of walls, it knocks down a little bit of walls, and adds a little bit better and just more understanding perspective on everything.
Yeah, a good way you could think about it when you're reflecting on your earlier years might be to think about, or to ask yourself, is this, first maybe you identify a certain quality within yourself that you think is a way that you react that isn't that you want to improve on, or that isn't good.
Yeah.
And so then you might ask, well, when can I first remember feeling this way? Or do I ever notice this same quality in other people, like my family members or my friends? And when can I first remember that, seeing it in them? Is it something I picked up from them? Where did this come from? And then at a certain point, you might realize that maybe it's bullshit, on some level. Maybe this thing that you've picked up is just something that you just sort of picked up at some point, and you just attached it to your identity and thought that's who you are.
Well, and this is where it come from, the point of like paying attention and understanding too. And this is what I tell my parents is like, and I've had like serious talks with my parents. I love my parents, this, you've met them. Like, I adore my parents. They're wonderful people.
Yeah.
And I've had arguments with here and there with my mom about certain things, and kind of what the root of the argument came down to at the end was, her almost like worrying about stuff. And I go, the one thing that I want you to understand, that I understand, and I've only started to really understand this later in my life, is my job as your child is to pay attention to all the wonderful things that you guys do and the negative things that you guys do, and refine as much of the negative stuff as I can and add that over to the positive side. Will I be perfect? No way. I'm going to have my own negative.
You mean for when you become a parent?
Just in life, right? Like life, okay. Right? Because like our example, for the most part, like for a lot of years of our life, is our parents.
Yeah.
Right. And especially in our developmental ages, in our ages where we're just sponges and we're learning. Right. And I think a lot of people just kind of take what they've learned as that's it, and they don't pay attention to it. Like even like the bad, and it's just like, that's my dad, that's me. That's my mom, that's me. Right. And my concept.
Sorry, go.
I was just gonna say, my concept there is kind of like, paying attention and seeing, like, these are the great things that my father and my mother, these role models, do for me. But just like any person, everyone has negative qualities, right? And as an offspring or a line of like lineage of like family, the whole point of anything, even capitalism, is what? Take the best of what's already existed and improve it somehow.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of what, like, the concept that I was like bringing to my parents, like, listen, like, you guys are wonderful people, but like me, we have flaws, and my job as a son is to kind of see your flaws and see how they're my flaws and refine those. And then when I have a child, you know, hopefully they see my flaws and my wife's flaws, and the goodness that we bring, and how they can build off that. You know what I mean?
So a couple of things come to mind. First is that great Bruce Lee quote that growth is about taking what works, discarding what doesn't, and then adding what's uniquely yours. So exactly. I think you've done a good thing by refining what I said earlier, that growth is about learning, because it's not just about learning, because I think to take something on, you also have to give something up. Everything has a cost. And so it's not just about what you're taking on, but it's also about what you're giving up. And is what you're giving up just whatever was next in line to go, or is it, are you choosing to deliberately give up those habits that aren't serving you anymore?
Again, like, I think it's like we talked about, like, everything, there's some sort of structure and there's some sort of like improvisation with it, you know, or like we talked, you know, structure and like just freedom. I think it starts with like structure, like you're really paying attention, and I think it kind of shifts into like almost like a free flowing. So it's kind of like
takes care of itself
almost in a weird way, right? Yeah.
But I just like that idea of the anger and hate is sort of from fear and ignorance, and that you know, it's that maybe there's something there, and that it's about people who haven't fulfilled their own hero's journey, who aren't seeing it all the way through, who are stopping themselves at some point, and that growth, this process, this journey is of growth, and growth is not just about taking something on, it's actually about giving something up too. You see that in that hero's journey, you know, you adapt to the situation, you get what you want, but you have to pay a heavy price to get it too.
And I just think on that mindset too, is like, if someone is a mentor to you, or someone is teaching you something, they're always telling you what to do and they're not asking questions with you, I think that could be a red flag as to, like, you know, like, again, like imagine having a father that was like in the States, that was like a white supremacist, and he told you to be, you know, scared of black people because they're bad. You know, if he was saying, you know, they're, you know, which is completely wrong, but if he was saying, like, you know, be scared of black people because they're bad and this is why they're bad, I went out with them and I put forth an effort to learn, you know what I mean, then at least you have some ground. But if like someone's just telling you something because they say it, like, and they're not asking questions about it, why, I think that's a red flag, and you should really just continue to ask why, you know.
I think it's important to try to verify things in your own experience.
Yeah Like, don't just take it for context, you know. So maybe one thing I was gonna say that me and Ben do a lot, and this is a little bit off context, a little bit off what we're talking about here, guys, and this is not in a perverted way at all, but don't be afraid to touch yourself. Like, literally just feel your body. I know it sounds funny, but me and Ben do this all the time. Just touch, right? Because touch is so important with the signaling of the brain. It gives you ideas as to maybe how something even needs to learn how to fire, and then you can teach you how to join the chain, you know.
Well, often it's the therapy. Like, I actually have to consciously not do it while we're doing these conversations, because I try to, because otherwise I'll be constantly fidgeting around.
I know. I find I do it. I'm like, I feel confined, like sitting here in a weird way.
But I think it's so surprising how often just touch can be the treatment that you need. You know, you have a sore, we know this, you get a massage when you got tight shoulders. Well, the same applies to all the tissue of the body. So whether it's from yourself or others.
And stimulation, right? A lot of times, like, one of the biggest issues that we can't stimulate an area. Well, have you ever touched it and then tried to stimulate it, and then now you have a reference point, you know?
It's a great way to get feedback as well, to actually get a sense of the body in those specific spots. So maybe that'll be our topic number 3, just a revisiting of the hero's journey, and of you know, the sources of fear and anger. That's a really good one. So, but I think that'll be one that we'll keep revisiting. But as I said,
it's very relevant to like everything, you know, and I really like it. It's kind of like a base. So
it gives a nice framework and some a familiar place for us to keep coming back to with these topics and to ground it all. That being said, I do need to go and get some bulk meat.
Yes, so Mr. Bulk Meat is gonna go deliver.
I know.
You know what I mean.
My name is Meat, Bulk Meat.
Yes.
I've come to clean your pool.
I'm gonna find if someone actually exists with that name. I'm gonna figure it out.
My God, is that Bulk Meat?
Is that Mr. Meat?
Excuse me, Mr. Meat. I'm a huge fan. I just
call me Bulk.
Call me Bulk. My friends call me Bulk.
Yeah, my friends call me Bulk, and the girls call me Bulk Meat. Just straight up. Lovely.
It's been awesome. I think we're getting a little bit better at this each week.
Yeah, let us know. But I do feel better, and I always love talking to you, and it's always growing, Mr. Bulk Meat. We're always growing.
Becoming.
Yeah, we're coming together.
Steve, always becoming.
Well, to be honest, and just where you're referencing this kind of, Arnold Schwarzenegger had the best line of life, and probably the most relevant line of life, guys. If you want to understand what like knowing your body's like, Arnold put in the context, working out, getting the pump, and just to test. I know the pump seems like in one regard of just like in the gym lifting, but like I think the context he's putting is like really just understanding how to use and feel your body. Feels like coming.
Better than coming.
Right? And hey, we all masturbate and we use that a lot. So that's why we know how to use it well. So hey,
practice.
Masturbate your biceps.
Never trust a skinny chef.
Your hamstrings. Yeah. Hey, what's going to be on our tagline? We're going to make buttons. Never trust a skinny chef. It's going to be a monkey, a jacked, fat chef monkey.
Meditating.
Yeah, that's it. That's all.
That's all for this week.
That's it, gentlemen. And
until
ladies,
the next one.
Over and out.